Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Retrospective. We're here again for yet another episode. We're really getting these out and consistently now. It's nice to see.
It's once a week.
It's once a week, but we've kept consistency, Chris. Stop raining on my parade. But anyway, yeah. Today we're joined by Nima today, who's a massive Italian football fan and works within the industry of writing about Italian football. He's worked with some pretty reputable names. So Nima, tell us about yourself. How are you, mate?
I'm good. It's good to be with you. My name is Nima Tavallaey Roodsari. I'm a football journalist. I started about 8 years ago when I started Sempre.com, which is now the biggest Inter Milan news site in the world. We cover Inter Milan 24/7, 365 days a year in English for all the English-speaking fans out there, which there's a couple of 100 million of them according to the latest calculations. So that's how I started, and since then I've worked for gianlucadimarzio.com, calciomercato.com. I've done exclusives for them, and as well as and interviews as well as for them and for goal.com.
Yeah, you've enjoyed quite the rise up the ranks in such a quite a short space of time in 8 years to become as established as you are.
Thank you.
And especially in such a fast-moving industry as well.
Yeah, it is. It's the digital journalism is especially these 8 years has been moving at an incredibly fast pace and at a very a lot of stuff has happened in a very short space of time for sure.
Absolutely. I feel like I jumped on Chris trying to ask a question as well, so apologies for that, Chris.
No, it's fine, mate. I do
Don't fight, boys. I'm here all night.
Yeah, so just starting off, really, we usually start off with this question. What's your first memory of thinking, or the first memory that you have of thinking, I want to be in media, or the first media memory you have in general?
The first media memory I have in general, or
either of them.
Yeah. What kicked it off for you, basically? So, is there any particular moment in your lifetime where you thought, I want to go and be a journalist?
Well, yeah. I mean, basically, what happened was it was pretty. I did law in the UK. I was just began my third year in law in Wales, and the credit crunch happened, the entire meltdown of the entire world's economy. So graduate jobs were about as common as three-breasted bulls. It's like you just didn't get any. So I decided that and to be honest with you, I was very happy and glad that I did law. It was a great experience for me, but I'd kind of already decided against it. And already I'd started writing as a hobby for a Swedish fan site, because I'm from Sweden, about Inter Milan, and I decided. I mean, this kind of just kind of accelerated my plans a little bit, because ever since I grew up, I grew up in the '80s. I'm that old, predate both the internet and the cell phones, if you believe it or not. But there was once a time when none of these things existed. But so basically what happened was when I grew up in the 80s, I loved Inter. My aunt was married to a German man. He had the satellite dish, and I used to watch the Serie A back then with Maradona, Lothar Matthäus, and all these. And the first game I remember was in 1989. The championship decider, pretty much, where Inter won. Lothar Matthäus won the game for Inter, and I fell in love with Inter. It was a home game, Inter-Napoli. Napoli had Maradona, Alemão, Careca, all these, Ciro Ferrara, all these fantastic players. And I remember, so that's how I fell in love with Inter. And through the years, I remember I always used to, when I was a kid, I used to get my allowance, and I used to buy the day-old Gazzetta dello Sport from the newsstands, as it were, back then. I used to pretend that I could read Italian and understand what was being said. So that I'd always followed it. And so I kind of learned Italian in what you guys call in the UK sixth form, just because of that. So and after I finished the sixth form, or high school or college or whatever you want to call it, I went to Italy, Florence, for 6 months to continue studying Italian at a private university there. And when I came back, so I already had that in place, and I decided that I wanted to, when that happened, I decided I basically did a market research. I saw what was out there, and I saw how many fans they did, and I said, you know what, I think there's an opening here, and I want to do this, and so I started, and we pretty quickly became the biggest in the world in English and stuff. And we've been, it's been a hard grind ever since to try to make this work.
Yeah, and so you said that you've fast become the biggest. Was there many before you?
There were a few. There were a few, but they weren't good. and I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but I honestly, I'm very blunt and honest, and everyone who's ever met me knows that I apply that bluntness and honesty to myself as well. I'm my own worst critic. That's how I was raised. I was raised, I'm Iranian. I was born in Iran. I was raised in Sweden. My parents my mother didn't mess around. Where she said she didn't think something was good. It's not like today's kids where they, touch them, they hold them, they treat them like they're Ming vases who break as soon as you tell them no. That's not how I was raised. When I did something good, I was told this is good, and when something was bad, I was told this is crap, in no uncertain terms. And so that's pretty much how I was raised, and there's no sugarcoating or bullshitting in our family. So therefore, I can honestly say that the ones that were out there were utter crap. They were unorganized. There was no consistency. There was no organization. There was no word count. There was no grammar. None of it. It was just basically random dude talks about Inter in incoherent language, in incoherent English and grammar, and I didn't want to do that. I really didn't. And so we started to build. And so when I founded the site, basically first did it in Swedish because I knew that we had to first gain, some work experience at a local level, and we pretty much within 6 months reached what I consider to be the kind of roof, the summit of what we could hit in Sweden, because we did lots of good stuff. We did lots of interviews with players, former players, Swedish internationals, etc. Everyone who had any connection with the Serie A, and it grew really fast. And so I decided that my plan was all along to do it in English, and pretty soon after that we kind of started launching it in English.
Yeah, so you've had that exact vision in your head because you saw like a niche in the market with the other competitors not really being up to scratch. So was there anything in particular in your mind that you wanted to do to differentiate yourself from those guys?
Yes. I wanted us to present I wanted us to become exactly what we became, and that is a hub, a new site, a site for all Inter fans, or anyone who's interested in Inter, but mainly Inter fans that aren't Italian speaking, that are mainly English speaking, that audience. So my prime target areas were the United States, the UK, Australia, Canada, because obviously those are the countries that have historically had loads of Italian immigration through the years in the beginning of the 20th century, and now and also down to the middle of it, and even longer than that. So I knew that and I also kind of knew that from a marketing point of view that's what it was, but also I remember when I grew up myself, we did, as I said, I didn't want anyone to have to go through that. I wanted to be a trusted source where they could find a community with other Inter fans without having to speak a language, and they could be given the news sources in a trustworthy manner, and as consistently and as quickly as possible.
Did you also feel like you could use it as a way of finding sort of the next generation of Inter journalists, or just Serie A journalists in general? Like you felt you could offer a launch pad almost?
Well, yeah, that's how it became. Guys. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it became as well, didn't it? Because, back then, football Twitter was a tenth of what it is now.
Yeah.
We were a very tight-knit community, and you kind of got to know a lot of people. And, basically everyone who was on Twitter like 7-8 years ago, they were on Twitter because they just wanted to meet other people, like-minded people, and it was a much more positive environment and a much more creative environment than it is now, where it's a sewer. Let's be honest. Twitter is a virtual sewer. I mean, and it's not just when it comes to sports. I think it's just, I mean, when you have a platform that you take zero responsibility for, like they do, and they allow anyone to come on there and say whatever the hell they want, as long as they don't violate the copyright laws, because that's really important.
That's a big problem. Yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah, you can threaten to kill people, you can spew out, you can threaten to rape, kill, maim. It doesn't matter how much racism you spew out, how much homophobia you spew out, but as long as you do not violate someone's copyright, then you're fine. So, and I mean, that's why Twitter has turned into what it has. I mean, that's what it is, the saying in China, the fish rots from the head down. This is what Twitter have wanted. They've not policed it. They've not done it properly. So now we have it. Now it is what it is, unfortunately. But it didn't used to be like that in the beginning, actually. It used to be a very creative, very interesting, tight-knit community of people who wanted to do content, who wanted to grow, learn and wanted to grow their brand, and everyone was there. So you pretty quickly got to know a lot of people. And so we did, and we grew the account, and we grew our follower base, not just on Twitter, but also on Instagram and Facebook. And you have to understand this period, these 8 years. I mean, Facebook used to be a source of traffic, where you would get traffic to your site by creating a Facebook page, and if a lot of people like that page, and then they would click. It doesn't work like that anymore. Facebook have triangulated to keep that traffic within their own community. Now that's how they make their money, basically, by having people, impressions and stuff. They changed that completely. It's not the same as it was before. It was much more straightforward before. So no, I mean, yeah, basically. So I got to know a lot of people via Twitter especially, who wanted to write, who wanted to also launch themselves, and so it was a kind of a give and take. It was a very like a, it was a relationship that helped everyone involved.
Absolutely, mate. Moving on, really. When you launched the website, so did you ever see it becoming more than a news site, so more of a content site? Was that a original plan, or did it evolve more into that?
No, my goal was very clear from the beginning. It was to become the biggest news site in the world, first in English and then in all languages. Obviously, it was never gonna. I realized that becoming bigger than the Italian sites is impossible because, the Italian sites, they're domestic and they live there, and it was always going to be difficult to do that. But I mean, that was the goal, to become the biggest and best at what we do and keep growing and reaching millions and millions of people globally. And also, after a while, once you have that basis and set your bread and butter, so to speak, you would also make your own exclusive content, and not just in forms of editorials and podcasts, but also exclusive, interviews and exclusive, like the stuff we did, for example, a couple of years ago, where we were the first to break the news that Freddy Guarin was not going to Juventus, but he was actually, that Eric Tohier had pulled the plug on that transfer. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, we were first. We beat everybody on that. We were there for the games and did, in the mixed zone, we did interviews with the players after the games, and we did, stuff like that. So that's what we wanted to do all along, and we're kind of doing that, and we're going to do that more regularly as well.
Yeah, pass.
I was just going to say, in terms of how, as we were talking about evolving and how Twitter's evolved, and a lot of things obviously evolved in that sense. So do you feel like yourself, along sort of the 8 years, how do you feel like you've changed your skill set in terms of, as opposed to just being a flat out writer at one point, maybe? Do you feel like you've learned more in the way of producing and editing, all these sort of things?
For sure. I used to consider myself as a writer and journalist in that sense. Now I feel I'm more like a chief editor and producer more than anything, because that's what I do. I mean, I hardly write anything nowadays. I just basically make sure that I run everything from the financial side of the site to the ad side of the site to finding content creators to all that stuff. That definitely it's kind of made me become much more broader in that sense. But I mean, that's also, I mean, that's kind of, when you have a small business and when you work in the media and you do it the way I do, you have to, you have to kind of realize that, okay, well, you have to realize that you can't do everything yourself. You have to find the
Yeah.
right people, and you have to have the right people at the right place. And sometimes if that means you have to give up on what you really want to do for a few years in order to come back to it and really do what you want to do, then so be it. But at the end of the day, you have to be very honest and open about what your goal is and do an analysis of how you get there. At the end of the day, that's what matters, at least
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. I mean, the other thing I want to touch on as well, and in the realms of Serie A is obviously, it's a league that's changed a lot in the last few years alone. As opposed, even if you speak more broadly, since the heyday, I guess you could say in the 80s and 90s, where it was really the place to be for football. I guess you could suggest it endured a little bit of a dip, sort of not so long ago, and it's on its rise again now.
Absolutely.
But with that, of course, there's been issues along the way. Obviously, you had Juventus Calciopoli scandal not so long ago. More recently, obviously, the whole, racism issues, you find in fan bases. What are your feelings on how the league tackles that? And do you feel like they do enough to tackle it? Or do you feel like they could do a hell of a lot more?
Oh, I mean, the Serie A, the problem with the Serie A and Italian society as a whole, if you were to talk to anyone who lives there and works in the media or is 50 years or 45 years or younger, they will tell you that the problem, it's like Italian society as a whole, and that is that it's controlled by a hardcore conservative group of old 60, 50, 60, 70 plus year old men who are completely immune, and they don't even get it what is wrong. I mean, the fact that the Serie A are completely gobsmacked and don't understand why everyone is reacting the way they did when they launched their anti-racism campaign, which was a bunch of gorillas dressed in different colors
Yeah,
clothes. That is like, they don't get it. They really just don't get it. and it just goes to and I understand the notion of what they're saying. Yes, all human beings are monkeys. We all, anyone who's gone to school knows that we've all evolved from apes, right? But in this day and age, when you have a systematic oppression towards black, a systematic attack on African players, or have players of African descent being monkey chanted against, and their humanity being taken away and being equated with monkeys, and then you go and do something like that, well, you have to be incredibly stupid, or I mean, it's one of those things. It's either you're incredibly stupid, or you don't get it, or you don't care. Personally, I think it's a mix of all three. They just don't get it. I don't think they really care. That's the tragedy of it, because at the same time I have so many colleagues who are younger, and same age and younger, who absolutely were horrified at this. They were embarrassed to the core, not just colleagues, but every Italian. I have members of my own family who are Italian. I have friends. They were absolutely horrified at the disgusting behavior and the embarrassing way in which they handled this. It's going to change, because you have to look at this as from a demographic point of view as well, and that is that Italy is the oldest country in Europe in terms of demographics. They have the oldest population. There are not as many Italians being born today as there are elderly so that kind of means that society, the age balance tilts a little bit to the elderly, and therefore it's conservative. But it will change. It definitely will change, because I think with the when you have Italian Americans and Chinese billionaires, and like Rocco Commisso, like the Suning group, when they come into Italian football, they also bring with them a freshness, a professionalism that is very different to anything Italy's been subjected to before. So I think I definitely think they could do a hell of a lot more, but I also think that there will be change. It's never change, no matter what aspect of life it is. If we look at history, whether it's society or politics or anything, it's a painful process. But at the end of the day, when that change that change is inevitable and it's unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I've researched about this before. I did it for a university project. And I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but I think it was the deputy PM or somebody like that. And he's in regularly, meeting with ultras of clubs and things like that. And I think there was one point where he spoke about the idea of having measures in place to like stop games and things like that. And I think he labelled it a slippery slope to go down if you start suspending games mid-game and stuff like that. And I was startled by that. I mean, I think
you have to remember. You have to remember who that guy is. That's Matteo Salvini you're talking about.
Yes, the one. Yeah.
And he's the leader of the fascist Lega, the League, who used to be called Lega Nord, which was a political group who wanted to secede from Italy. They wanted the north of Italy to leave Italy because they were tired of paying for all the poor people and in the south, as they called it. So this is the group of people. This is who they are. And he himself, Salvini, is a former AC Milan ultra, and their ultras are far-right fascists, and are famously and infamously so. So, I don't really take what. So you have to remember who says what as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In the Italian context, it's really important to remember who is saying it and what their political goal is, because Italy is maybe a young country, only 150 years old, but the Roman Empire is thousands of years old, and politics in that peninsula is thousands of years old. And so you have to kind of, one thing about Italy, no matter whether it's football or politics, is you have to be able to remember 18 different things at once, because it's a very it's very interesting in that sense. It's a very multifaceted and complex country, which is fascinating, but can also be infuriating.
Yeah, I can think that the fact that there's, obviously so many things to remember, and I feel like maybe people, because they don't necessarily know who these certain figures are. I mean, I know the odd few here and there, but I don't know the sort of nitty and gritty of it. So I think that maybe
the Lega is basically like, think UKIP and BNP, to put it in a British perspective. Okay, this isn't your.
It's not the norm. Basically.
No, it's not the norm. But Italy is a volatile society as well. So, like everywhere else, it's things are changing. So, and they change very quickly. So I wouldn't, whatever he says, I wouldn't take it too seriously.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, sorry. No, go on, Chris. We're gonna fight soon.
One thing I wanted to ask is, with your website, with your content that you put out, do you tend to stray into more political, say, cultural games, or do you want to stick to the football rather than stray into the cultural and political side of things?
It depends, because it depends on what kind of content we're talking about here. I mean, I think people who say that football and politics, keep politics out of football, that's ridiculous. They don't know what the hell they're talking about, because everything in this world is political in one shape, size, or another, and you just got to keep an open mind about that. And especially in Italy, where football and politics are inherently inseparable, because they've always been inherently inseparable, because it's always been, you can look at it as a form of, there's a reason why Silvio Berlusconi bought AC Milan and made them the biggest club in the world before launching a career in politics. First he proved himself in football and showed how big he can make them, and then he entered the world of politics. Italy is different that way. But I think it depends on if you're reporting news, and it's basically news reporting. You have to refrain. I think it's your obligation to refrain from personal commentary. And if you put personal commentary in, you have to make that as clear as possible, that this is the commentary part and this is the news part. And you always have to source, unless, so that you say who's it from. We always, and also where that news is based. Is the newspaper from Naples? Is it from Rome? Is it from Milan? Where is it from? Is it from Turin? All that stuff kind of matters. Then I think at the end of the day, it's up to the reader to decide to make his mind up. I think you should just give the information in terms of news. But if you're doing an op-ed, if you're doing an editorial, if you're doing a podcast where you're giving your opinion, or a YouTube video or whatever, where it's your opinion, you have to be honest that this is your opinion, and you're analyzing this that way. I think, as long as you're honest and clear to the reader and to the person watching, you'll be fine. But you know, you just got to be. I think it's difficult, but we try to do it as much as possible, is to make it as clear as possible. And the news reporting side, we separate it completely, because I think there's no matter if it's sports news or political news or whatever news it is, you know, my issue is that people pretend that they're not biased when they are. You know, keep it real. Is it commentary or is it news reporting? If it's commentary, that's fine. But if it's news reporting, just state the facts and source them. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think a good example of that was obviously, you know, amidst all the storm with Cristiano Ronaldo's rape allegation earlier in last year. And all the sort of news articles that were coming out, but being twisted in with people's opinions, saying, "Oh, he's guilty. No, he's not guilty," and people sort of fighting amongst it.
Well, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, in the UK, barely anyone touched that, because they were, you know, until Cristiano Ronaldo himself in his Instagram live. You know, if you want to say from a legal point of view that, you know, you can't do it because you can get sued, which is nonsense, because at that point you're reporting the news, especially when there was a file, when a police report had been filed in Las Vegas, then it's news reporting. You can't get sued for that. But okay, let's just say that the establishment media were right, and their legal aides were right in saying that you can't touch this because we can get sued. But after Ronaldo himself on Instagram answered that question directly and denied it, then you can report it. And still several of I don't want to name names here, they know who they are, but it's all the big ones, they still didn't report it. And that was shameful. That is absolutely shameful, because at that point, when he himself is on his Instagram live, when he's asked by one of his followers, is this true or not, and he says no, it's not true, then you can report it, because you're 100% safe legally. So I think there's a lot of reckoning to be done there amongst people, but you know, I don't people in the industry would report with regards to how this was reported, and I'm not one of the people who says that, you know, I have a background in law. I'm a firm believer in due process. Although you don't have it in the UK, but I'm a firm believer in innocent until proven otherwise. I think everyone has a right to have their day in court, and I'm vehemently against people who say, you know, just because you're accused of something means it's true. No, I don't. I really don't believe that. I don't know if Cristiano Ronaldo raped that woman. I really don't know, because I haven't seen the material, but I think it's quite, you know, I can't say with any certainty what happened, and no one can. So I'm not going to say this, that, or the other. All I'm going to say is that when it comes to the reporting, I think a lot of people should be ashamed of how they didn't report it.
Sticking with obviously Ronaldo and him joining the Serie A, you know, you've had some, you know, quite substantial names in that league over time. How was your sort of take on when he joined Juventus? I mean, did you think obviously it was good for the league in the sense of what he brings, you know, he brings mass attention, he's huge. But in terms of like, beyond that, do you feel like it was a good move for Juventus to take in a 35-year-old Ronaldo, 34-year-old Ronaldo at that stage?
I think so. I think it was it did wonders for their brand. For the Juventus brand, it was a brilliant move. Maybe not from a business point of view. Maybe in terms of how much money he earns, and the fact that he's you know, the age he is, and he has zero resale value, and they won't be able to recoup any of the money they paid on him. From that point of view, maybe it's a bad idea. But then again, you have to look at their brand and how much that grew, and how much more money they made from that, and also the, you know, sponsorship deals and all that stuff. So I think when you look at it, I think they did a brilliant thing. I think it was a statement of intent, because Ronaldo, at that point in time, had just won his third Champions League in a row, and written history at Real Madrid. So it was I think for them it was a brilliant move, especially if they want, you know, their target was, we're going to win the Champions League, and they wanted to win it with him. So that was the right move to make, I think. And also for the league, I guess, in a sense as well, because if Ronaldo and Messi, they've been dominating world football for 10 years now, and you know, having him come there is good for the league as well. But obviously the Juventus benefited the most from it.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you feel like it's helped, you know, obviously your own side, Inter, and other sides in terms of attracting more star players to that league? I mean, I saw a lot of people debating this, saying, "Well, if Ronaldo's going there, then it's going to attract other big names to the same place." But I always wondered, does that necessarily work that way? It's not. I don't know. In my mind, sporting math never works, does it?
I mean, I don't know. I just know that at the end of the day, these guys at the top, they want to win.
Yeah.
For them, it matters who the coach is. For them, it matters, the structure of the club, who's, the project. Is it a winning project? Is it a credible project? For Inter, bringing in, Suning, who's a Fortune 500 company, and then bringing Marotta, and then bringing in Antonio Conte, that's a statement of intent. That's a statement of a club that wants to win, that has a winning project, and is going places. And that's why, I think for them to get Lukaku and it was easier to get someone like Lukaku and all these other players who blatantly said, we went there because Antonio Conte wanted us and we wanted to work with him. I think that kind of thing matters a lot more
absolutely.
than just Cristiano Ronaldo playing for Juve. I don't think that decided a lot of things.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's more on an individual basis depending on the project at hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so what I'll say to you, sort of nearing the end now, is that if you go back, obviously you studied law and you went through and you created the website. Is there one thing in your time that you would change?
You mean in these 8 years?
In your entire life leading up to it as well? Well, in terms of that.
Sorry,
It's confusing.
You're confusing.
Yeah,
are you talking about my professional career in journal?
Your professional career.
Okay, if I regret anything there?
Yeah, if you could change one thing, what would
if I could change one thing? Definitely one thing. And that was maybe that I was a little bit too naive in the beginning about who I worked with. I would not have made I would not have worked with a group of people. I would have made a different choice when it came to working with some people. Yes, I would not have worked with them. I would not have decided to maybe make some naive decisions that I think now in retrospect was naive. But I'm not going to go into detail more than that, guys.
That's fine, no problem. But in
terms of at the end of the day, I think that's a really good question, because I don't regret anything. I don't, because I think at the end of the day, you have to learn from your mistakes. And my mistakes, I learned a lot from. I paid a lot for them as well, but I also learned a lot from them. And I think that's important. I think that's really important. I think you have to learn from your mistakes. It's one thing to make, as long as you don't repeat the same mistake more than once, then you're fine, and you learn from it. But other than that, it's life. Nobody knows everyone's going to make mistakes.
So if you were to meet your younger self, or just to sort of younger journalists now looking to break into the industry again, what would you advise those people that are sort of fresh faced and almost like new blood going into it?
Work hard, and I mean be prepared to work hard, like very hard. Sacrifice everything. I mean, the media industry now is pretty much impossible to break into. It's very hard unless you come from a very affluent background and can afford to do these unpaid internships for months on end. And it's not just in football, it's in all aspects of the media. Then, if you come from that, then fine. But if you don't come from that, it's very hard. And understand what it is you're getting yourself into, and be prepared that it's going to take a lot of years before you make it. And there's no guarantee that you make it either. And it's, so I don't want to discourage anyone from doing it. I'm just being I'm a very blunt and honest person. I'm just saying how it is. And it's difficult. A lot of people I know now in this Corona age, people who have millions of followers on Twitter, have lost their jobs. Okay. It's a very topsy-turvy, unstable business, and try to work hard, be vigilant, be open, be humble, be humble and open, and try to learn as much, study as much as you can in terms of facts and history of different clubs, and don't be the kind of guy who thinks that, who wants to sound intelligent. Be the guy who actually is intelligent and is learned and is knowledgeable, as opposed to a guy who just wants to look intelligent in front of a bunch of followers on Twitter. That kind of shit is so easily, that's a fraud. That people
That's
like that.
That's you, mate.
I did not say that. No, Jesus Christ. I don't want to this is your domestic. Keep me out of it. No, but seriously, no. I mean, honestly, don't be that guy. Because that's a guy. Everyone can see through that, and you won't get anywhere. Be prepared to work hard and be open to learning, and yeah. It's a difficult industry to break into, and it's I probably if it's different, because when we started there was an opening, it was a different age, it was a different time. Now it's even harder. It wasn't easy back then, 9 years ago. Now it's even harder, if you ask me. It's really hard, and so I really respect people who work hard, but also it's another thing. You have to decide if you want to be a journalist, or do you just want to be an internet celebrity? Do you want to be a
it's a fine line, isn't there, at this stage? It's like people
I think it's a very clear line, but you have to decide who you want to be. Do you want a YouTuber, or some sort of social media, someone like that, or do you want to be a journalist? You have to make a decision there, and you have to stick to it. Do you want to be a journalist, or do you want to just be a guy who has lots of followers and does a bunch of stupid shit on YouTube? That's fine, but there's a difference between work. That's working in the media, but that's not journalism. And you have to decide what you want to do and stick to it and work hard.
Absolutely.
That's a very good way to finish, I think, Has.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Nima's given us some very interesting information. I've learned a hell of a lot in this one again.
Absolutely, we always learn a lot, because all our brains are like sponges. In this is our studying.
Speak for yourself. I might be 22, mate, but this is about 65 at this stage.
Anyway, that's a good way to finish. This will be out in 2 weeks' time from when we're recording this. So we might have hit 200 subs by then. So if not. But this is if we haven't, please do it, because it'll be nearly my birthday then, and I want to hit it by my birthday.
Happy birthday, dude.
Well, it's in like a month's time, so.
Well, I want to wish you happy birthday in advance.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much. I'm sure I'll try and buy my first legal pint as soon as I can.
Jesus, how old are you?
This is my 18th birthday. I know. I look, baby.
You look. I would. Yeah. I said. Yeah. No. Okay. So. Yes, so you turn 18 in a month. Okay, well that's.
I mean, it's touch and go with me. I can either look, 12 or 25. It's sort of it's either way. But anyway.
Then again, you're white European, so you don't have as much facial hair as me and Has to. I mean,
maybe we don't.
Listen,
if we don't shave for like 3 days, we would look like our grandparents would. Pretty much like.
I grew this walking up the stairs on the way up here.
Exactly.
That's a great way to finish it off. And Has, take us out, mate.
Well, Nima, tell us where we can find your work and where we can find you on social and stuff like that.
Well, if they want to follow the site, sempreinter.com, we have an app out as well that we released recently, sempreinter.com in iOS and Google Play. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at sempreinter.com. And if you want to follow me, and read, I basically tweet about football, politics, and music, so it's at Nima TAVROOD.
Perfect, mate. Thank you. And as to everyone that's watching or listening at home, we'll see you on the next one.